Hey Rhea, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Jeff. How about you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Perfect. Look, thank you for coming on because, well, this is one of the series that we're doing with Good Guys Tuition, the YouTube channel, and a lot of students ask about finance, and I know you're an interesting part of finance, equity research. So appreciate you coming on. Let's kind of start from the top, and it's almost going to sound a little bit like an interview, really, but I really want to get the information out to the students. So why don't we start with your GCSEs? What were your GCSE subjects, and then A level as well?
Yeah, sure. So at GCSE, apart from the kind of normal core subjects, I chose drama, German, Spanish, history, and geography. I enjoyed both the languages, and history was my favorite subject by far, so I chose that. And then for A levels, I knew I wanted to study economics at a Russell Group university. So those are the top tier universities in the UK. And for a lot of them, you need further maths as an A level subject. So my school didn't do the IB, they only did A levels. So I chose maths, further maths, economics, and history. And what I would say is that with further maths, you have to be very conscious with your decision because it is a pretty tough subject and it can take a lot more of your time studying and learning it than you might think it would. So something to just think about for those people who are considering taking it as a fourth subject.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to ask you about further maths, but you've touched upon it yourself. So, any tips on sort of further maths, how to tackle? Because we have students who are taking further maths. So, any advice that you can give them?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, felt like I was one of the worst in the class, or it definitely felt like it during year 12 and 13. Um, and I would definitely say use your friends around you, ask them questions, because sometimes different people understand different things, so work together. Also, definitely, if you're stuck on anything, ask your teachers. They will be more than happy to help and do lots of practice. I think practice is also kind of what helped me build my confidence in further maths, on top of just asking for help. That was the only way I kind of pulled through the whole thing. But
Yeah.
if you really are struggling after doing all of that, then it is something to consider at the end of year 12. Do you really want to continue with that
Yes.
going forwards?
Yes. You always have the option, don't you? Yeah. And I just want to touch upon one of the things that you said as well, which is, you felt like you were maybe the worst student, right? And that's 2 years continuously. And, it's just one thing for the students really to see that, look, initially you might find something a little bit difficult, but, you obviously did very well with your exams. So don't be kind of discouraged with that kind of initial
Yeah,
feeling, right?
yeah,
It's all about consistency, practice, and eventually you will get there.
yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, Ria. I suppose let's go on to university then.
Mhm.
You wanted to do economics. Where did you go? And can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I studied economics at the LSE, so that's the London School of Economics. It's based in London. And through my degree, well, I chose my degree because I thought that I wanted to join the Model UN or the World Bank or the IMF. So these are all large institutions that are dealing with often the world's poorest in different capacities. But I thought that I would want to do economics for that reason. And then after joining the LSE, I quickly realized that there were other career paths that might be better for me in the short term, or at least more secure than joining those. So that was actually quite helpful to find out when I joined the university. But at university, other than just studying, I mean, I was part of different clubs, so I would definitely recommend that to anyone who is applying and who does get into their uni. Definitely apply to different clubs and societies. It's one of the best ways to make new friends,
Yeah,
and also just discover things about yourself and new skills.
absolutely brilliant. What was the maths like doing economics at university?
Yeah, so I think it really differs at different universities, but
Mhm, mhm.
at LSE, I mean, it was because I had studied further maths, I could just go straight on to doing the maths. For anyone who hadn't, they
Yeah.
often had to take kind of a maths course
Mm,
um, to get onto the same level as everybody else.
yeah.
But it was quite abstract at times, I would say, very algebraic.
Yeah.
Um, and then for economics specifically, There's also modules called econometrics, which is like a statistics-based module. So you should be quite familiar with statistics as well.
Okay, yeah, perfect. I always tell my students as well. So I opted to do accounting and finance, and I've told you this before, haven't I? Because I just thought, and I did it at LSE as well, and
Mhm.
it was more practical for me.
Yeah.
And actually, for that, I didn't require further maths. So there are other avenues out there as well. I went on to start my career in banking as well. So there are other options that you
Yeah.
can explore. It's good to speak with someone, to find out what those options are. Brilliant. So you did economics at LSE. Then how did you sort of get into equity research? How did that sort of career kind of start?
Yeah, so as I said, it kind of came from LSE. LSE is a very good university for getting lots of people into the banking and finance world. And so when I joined, I mean, you'll remember Jeff as well, we were churning out spring week applications. So this is a 1 or 2 week spring internship that students do in their first year of studying at university. Um, and I mean, I applied to dozens of different investment banks out there. Now, even more kinds of firms do spring weeks, like law firms and accounting firms. So it's not just banking specific. Um, and actually, even in the kind of consumer and retail world, if you want to work in the corporate head office of some of these big companies out there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I secured a spring internship and then I converted that into a summer internship, which is
Okay.
during my second year of university. And then I converted that into a graduate role. So after I graduated, I had a set job. And within that, for my graduate role, I landed in equity research, which I kind of got into because I realized that the skills that are required for equity research matched the skills that I thought I had. So I'm pretty analytical. I like writing. I like talking. So those are all the skills you need for that kind of job.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into it.
Perfect. Perfect. You've kind of mentioned, the spring weeks, the summer internships. Would you agree that that's probably one of the best ways to sort of break into finance?
Yeah, yeah. I would say if you can convert a
Mhm.
summer internship and specifically into a graduate role, it's much easier to get into the job day one than it is to apply once you have graduated into the big banks or finance firms out there.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so let's look at the life of an equity research analyst in a little bit more detail, right? Can you just tell us a little bit more about the role itself?
Yeah, so first thing I will say is that an equity research analyst starts work at 7 in the morning. So it's
Sleepy.
not for those late owls, although I am a night owl. So I've been struggling for 6 years trying to wake up every day on time.
Yeah.
But I enjoy the role enough to do it. So what is equity research? Essentially, we are researching the strategy of large, and I'm talking about multi-billion pound or euro or dollar companies out there in the world that are listed on stock exchanges. So think about if you are already trading or your parents are trading in shares, for example. Let's take Apple. Apple is listed on the stock exchange in the US. So an equity research analyst would research the strategy of Apple, so looking at including kind of the new models of the phones that are coming out, the iPads, what they're
Yeah.
doing in AI, for example.
Yeah.
And then we try to value or come up with our own forecast for the profits of the company over the next few years, and
Mhm.
also what the balance sheet, so how big the company actually is. So we're trying to forecast all of this very important financial information because we're then trying to come up with a valuation for the share price of Apple. So should Apple be worth $500 per share? Should it be worth $1,000 per share? Just throwing those numbers out. Um, and then that comes up with an overall value for Apple. Should it be a company that's worth 500 billion pounds or £1 trillion? Because there are a few £1 trillion companies in the US. And we take all of that analysis and then we recommend to our clients who are big institutions, these are hedge funds, pension funds, asset managers, whether they should be buying or selling Apple shares. So that's kind of what the whole job is in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, but happy to pick that in a different series with you.
Okay, perfect. Great. So you're looking at sort of the past, you're looking at the future of the company as well, having to predict things. So it sounds really interesting, really cool. So let's just kind of summarize then some of the parts of the job, right? So what are some of the best parts of the job in your opinion? Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I started working in equity research when I was 22, I think. And from around that age, I was exposed, as I said, to these massive companies. So I cover UK companies. So I'm not looking at trillion-pound or trillion-dollar sized names, but I'm still looking at companies that are worth 10, 20 billion pounds, which is a lot of money.
Mm,
Um, so having access to that kind of world
mm,
is not something that I ever imagined when I was at school, let alone university. So I think that's always something that I think about. Another thing that's related to that is I've had access to CEOs and CFOs. So these are the leaders of these companies from a very young age. And that's something you don't get in many finance roles at all, let alone outside of the finance industry. So it's a lot of responsibility, but I get to speak to these leaders a couple of times a year. And they know who their equity research analysts are because it's important for them to know how we're valuing the company. So I would say that's definitely a highlight of the job.
yeah, yeah, it's amazing learning experience, isn't it, to
Yeah.
start so early and have that sort of experience as well. Brilliant. So what are some of the downsides then, would you say, of the role?
Yeah. So amongst all of that analysis that I said,
Mhm.
it's sometimes when you recommend the wrong thing to your
Yeah.
clients. So for example, saying sell this company, sell the shares of this company, and the share price just keeps going up for ages. So you feel quite often gutted. What did I miss in my analysis? Where did I get it wrong? So that can be disheartening at times, but a good equity research analyst is one that's also very resilient. You have to be able to pick at your own analysis, try and figure out where you might have made the wrong assumption somewhere, and try and build back that credibility with your clients. So it's tough, but it's also, again, a learning experience, I would say.
Yeah. Look, as we wrap up, maybe some kind of additional questions that I hear often from students, and we even hear on media, right? So, in terms of banking, high pay, can you confirm or deny?
um, so I would say it really depends on the role. So very, very simplistically, you can break an investment bank. So I'm only talking about banks at the moment, but you can split an investment bank between the back office function. So these are the operations, technology, for example, um, the middle office, although back office and middle office can sometimes merge. But middle office is usually providing support to the front office, which is where I work. And the front office just means front facing. So you're actually the one speaking to the clients. Front office staff are usually paid the most, but there are pros and cons. I mean, people who do work in banks are paid on
Mhm.
average more than most other people out there. And then between front and back, for example,
Yeah.
it's about other factors out there. So, for example, there is more pressure in my job. So that's part of why my pay is a bit more. My hours are a bit annoying. 7 a.m. start, and sometimes I'm working until 6 or 7 p.m., so 12-hour days. Again, that's what the pay is recognizing as well. So there is that to consider. But yes, I mean, most banking, finance roles, accounting roles will be paid more, especially
Yeah.
in the big institutions.
Yeah, and it's really for you to sort of see, what you value because
Yes,
there's kind
correct.
of pros and cons.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Perfect. Thank you, Rhea. So, any final pieces of advice for our students then?
Sure. I mean, there's a few things I would say. So, I mean, firstly, you at the age of 14, 15, 16, 17, there's no way you know exactly what you want to do or what you're going to become unless you're Ronaldo or Messi, for example. But most of us are at that age are just trying to figure out what we like to do. You fall into a university, you fall into a degree. You might not even go to university and do a degree. You might just go straight from school leaver into a job or start your own business. Apprentices, but also just those who are starting their own business at such a young age are probably ahead of the curve actually. Um, but for all of the rest of us, you don't know what you're going to become. So explore lots of different avenues, talk to lots of different people. So if you think you are interested in banking or finance, I would say set up a LinkedIn account and reach out to people in that world. Or if you have family, friends, or relatives, or ask your teachers if they know anybody, try and speak to these people to figure out what roles they do, what they enjoy about their work, what skills they would recommend you start building, so that you get a picture of what actually interests you in that world. So that's one, just kind of networking to learn. I would also say start doing extracurriculars in school or out of school as well. Not only does this just make you a holistically more interesting person, it's useful to put on your CV as well, because when you try and apply for any job, let's say at the age of 18, you have not much to your name at that point. You've not worked in an organization for 5, 10 years. But if you can show that you were in these clubs at school, um, or you were running kind of like the prom society for end of year, that kind of stuff is really useful for your CV. But you learn key skills. You learn leadership, teamwork, communication, etc. So I definitely recommend doing that. And then thirdly, there are so many ways you can find out more about the kinds of career paths that people might be interested in. So, for example, there are insight days or unpaid work experiences that people can do at the end of GCSEs or during the year 12 summer or the year 13 summer. So keep an eye out on websites like Student Ladder, for example. There are so many websites out there collating that information.
Yeah.
Um, so definitely, again, try and apply to those because that's a good way of figuring out what you want to do.
Absolutely. I think we'll leave a link below to some of those websites
Yeah,
as well, so you can
sounds
sort of
good.
have a browse. Yeah, so brilliant. Got more than I bargained for there. So thank you so much for all the amazing pieces of advice there, Rhea. So really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
All
Good
right,
luck,
take
everyone.
care.